one thing about them, and I think this is more so the case now than it ever was in any time before. They are so full of themselves, and there's so much ego. And ego, as I say all the time, is the antidote to your intelligence, right? Ego is the thing that'll tell you that even though this is not a smart thing to do, you can do it because you're you.
Yeah.
You know, so they don't, and there's a lot. I mean, they've had so much liberty for so long that they've really developed a non-reality type, sense of self. And I mean, psychopathy, that shit rules. Like the motherfuckers at the top, the CEOs of all the major corporations, sociopaths, psychopaths, like
Yeah.
this is not a random perspective. Like there are tons of documentaries and by qualified individuals and papers and so forth that have studied the fact that there's a certain type of mindset that rises to the top of these structures, these
Yeah.
social structures, financial structures, political structures. There's a certain type of mindset, and what you're seeing now is like the ultimate culmination of generations and generations of these types of antisocial, sociopathic, narcissistic people constantly being pushed to the forefront or pushed up the ladder, whatever, despite their conditions or their lack of qualifications and so forth, right?
I mean, I think these people are pushing themselves up the ladder.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
these
saying.
people,
Like
these are the kind of people that I mean, they're stepping on next to get to the top. They don't give a fuck. And those are
no,
the
but
people. And
those are the people that get opportunity because they show that they have a lack of moral core and they're
yeah,
willing to do anything. So the people who are already in position,
oh
they
yeah,
make sure they facilitate opportunity for those people.
yeah, yeah.
You
Because
understand?
they're
Because they
already
want
that
to
kind of person.
maintain that agenda. They
Yeah,
want to make sure that the structure they have in place stays in place. So you
yeah,
can't let good, decent, moral, ethical people slide in and infiltrate your system,
yeah,
right? That's like
yeah.
me being on the block back in the days, and I'm on the block and I'm getting $30,000, $40,000 a day on this block, and I decide to let the old lady who is the head of the block committee and the church leader, whatever, decide to let her in and start contributing to some of the decisions I'm making about how I'm operating my business in her neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I
fact.
know that's gonna end up. I'm gonna be out of there in no time. Ain't gonna be no
Yeah,
more. Doing what the fuck I want to do, how I want to do it, and getting it the way I want to get it. Ain't gonna be no more of that because
yeah,
there's a different element that's been added, a converse, a converse element. Something that goes against what it is that we on. So the thing is, and this has happened in the street from generations of like when it first started out, you were dealing with some hardcore, cold-blooded motherfuckers who were dealing with a hardcore, cold-blooded world that contributed a lot to their hardcoreness and their cold-bloodedness, right? The original gangsters, original black gangsters, right? So, and before them, the original European gangsters, because it was them first, you
mm-hmm.
know? So when those people, those original black gangsters, when they came out, and they started doing the things they were doing and setting up the structures and the systems they were setting up so that they could make money, they could provide other people who were willing to take those levels of risk, the opportunity to make money and, advance their family situations and so forth, which was a small group of people relative to the size of our community. Most people didn't want to be bothered or didn't want to be involved in criminality, right? But the ones who were, they were willing to take the risk, so they reaped great reward. And then the next generation came along and they inherited the attitudes and the mentality and the drive and all that, whatever, but it was a different level of motivation because the circumstances created by that first generation of black gangsters kind of smoothed out a lot of what it was that drove the black gangster in the first place. So that next generation, they were more so going off of the sense of duty and responsibility for what was being handed to them by the generation before them. But their level of motivation wasn't the same. They hadn't been experiencing, all the things that were taking place in the 40s, the 30s, 40s, and 50s. and 60s. They weren't experiencing that, right? So
Mm.
what was their connection to the struggle, to the lifestyle? It was the opportunity to have access to opulence, to have access to, money and the things you could do and buy with money, right? But not the level of motivation. This is consumerism. They're being driven by. They're being driven by, the desire to have a level of the lifestyle that the original gangsters had,
Yeah, flashes.
right?
Right.
So when that generation acquired its, uh, material experience, whatever, um, what it was able to import into the next generation was more levels of consumption, greater levels of consumption, and um, the desire to be recognized for that consumption. So the original generation was low key, not preoccupied with who knew they were getting it, because they knew there was still a system in place that was very much against them being able to get it. So they did a lot of what they did uh, clandestinely in the shadow, right? And
Mm.
then provided a little bit of an easier way for the next generation, which is the generation that came about in the 70s, latter 60s and the 70s, the ones that came of age, the Ronnie Bumps and so forth of that generation. Bump was born in 50. By 63, he running around, he in the street, he's sticking up. 64, he's putting needles in his arms, he's going through that whole shit, whatever, right? Because they had, a level of exposure and access that the generation before them did not have. A level of freedom, a liberty that they did not have. So they were able to be a little more looser, a little more flamboyant, a little more, yeah, see me something type shit. You look at me. The next generation, my generation that came after those guys, um, we had less of a connection to the struggle that gave way to the original generation than the generation that gave way to us. So it became now like, what is our motivation? First generation, their motivation was come the fuck up, get in power, empower themselves, be able to, a lot of those businesses that were started and created that were prominent in, places like Harlem back in the 60s, that was number money and drug money that enabled those legitimate enterprises to come about, because there was no bank giving no money to nobody black, right? So when that generation, bumping them generation, when those guys came about and were able to have another level of opulence and expression and flash, that was the draw for my generation,
Mm.
having no connection to the original motivation, which was we needed to create our own circumstances, our own financial foundation from which to grow and develop, just like the Europeans had, for a couple of decades before us, right? That they ended up becoming the lawyers and the bank. Their kids ended up becoming the lawyers and the bankers. Joe Kennedy's kid became the president of the United States, and his other kid became the attorney general, whatever. But he was a straight up motherfucking liquor running out a fucking gangster. You know what I mean? So when you got to my generation, who didn't know shit about what this was all about in the first fucking place, all they thought this was about was their personal aggrandizement. This is my personal platform to put myself on the forefront and say, look at me, I'm a grand nigga. But I had nothing to fucking contribute, nothing
Yo,
whatsoever,
grand
except for
nigga is hilarious.
mindless fucking consumption. And then this music came along, and this music was targeted towards youth and their angst and their suffering and their frustrations. And it captured that youth, my generation. It captured us. And for a minute, it was saying the things that needed to be said. And then all of a sudden, it got on some, no, but wait, look at me though. Look at me, look what I got.
Yeah.
That when that came about, that was the expression of the next would-be generation of street guys. Remember, you got the first generation, those guys that came up in the 20s and 30s and 40s and gave way to bumping them generally. I'm talking about like, guys like John Freeman from Chicago, or from Queens by way of Chicago, then Harlem, then Queens. He's known of as Pop Freeman to people, but he was Ronnie Bump's mentor, one of his mentors, and his boss. And so John Freeman was born in 1898, Southside Chicago. So he did his shit running around in the 20s and the 30s, hardcore, real cold blood gangster shit. That's before he even comes to fucking Harlem. You understand what I'm saying? But his motivation was very, very clear. They ain't gonna let us have a motherfucking thing that we're not willing to die for, claw for, fight for, bleed for, kill for. Period. Right? So everything they acquired was very, very serious to them, very valuable to them, because they understood they played with it with everything. They paid for it with everything they were. Then bumping them generation comes along, less of a connection to that. More of a connection to the opportunity to have the level of opulence that they watched men like Bumpy Johnson and John Freeman have. The cars and, the fine clothes and so forth, whatever. When I was growing up, gangsters wore suits. In my lifetime. That's why you see me in pictures at 14 and 15 years old wearing slacks and hard bottom shoes and silk shirts and, dressed like a grown ass motherfucking man, because those were the kinds of examples that were set for me. That's consumption. I did not know why they did those things. I just know that these are the things they did, and I identified with that.
Yeah.
Right? The generation I came up with, most of those were regular fucking people. So they really didn't have no connection to anything other than what they were able to observe with their eyes. They couldn't hear shit. They didn't have proximity to those gangsters. All they saw was the cars, the jewelry, and the furs and the clothes. So when the New Jack era begins, 80, 81, 82, and cats started being able to get access to, cocaine and so forth, mid-80s, only thing they were connected to as far as the original ilk of gangster was consumption. That's it. Buying shit. And then the music became the motivating soundtrack for consumption, for mindless fucking consumption. Buy shit that you can't fucking afford. Nigga, what was I doing buying a $20,000 motherfucking fur coat, having a $20,000 motherfucking mink coat, custom design, and I was living in an apartment on 168th Street in home. What the fuck what was I doing? I didn't know shit about how to purchase a home. Nothing. I didn't even know how to fucking open a bank account. You dig what I'm saying? Like, you dig?
Yeah.
You dig? Like, what has come from that is everything you're seeing now. Everything. All the superficiality, all the mindlessness, all the short-sightedness, all the materialism, all the deviance, man. When this motherfucking book comes out with Ronnie Bump that I'm doing, bro, these motherfuckers were terrible when it came to women, bro. They were terrible.
Yeah.
They were terrible, bro. Turning women out, it's been going on for generations, bro. A bunch of these girls that y'all are dealing with now, their grandmothers were turnouts. They old church ladies now, so that's what their grandchildren. That's what they think. They think they always been that. But grandma was a hot pocket, baby. She was a hot pocket. And you did. She was face first between every pair of fucking legs she could find. You know how many times? Since we've been working on this book for 20 months, bro.